revealing the unspoken mysteries of Custer's last stand. Eyewitness insight introducing Edward Godfrey Jr., an experienced cavalryman and one of the few officers of the 7th Cavalry Regiment to survive the Battle of Little Bighorn. His vivid recollection of that fateful day provides a crucial perspective on the events that unfolded during Custer's last stand. In our previous discussion, we explored Godfrey's first-hand account, but today we will dive even deeper into the untold aspects of the battle. Before we proceed, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to show your support. On June 22, 1876, at the mouth of Rosebud River in Montana Territory, General Custer received written orders. The instructions from the Brigadier General commanding were addressed to Lieutenant Colonel Custer of the 7th Cavalry. They directed him to advance up the Rosebud River in pursuit of the Indians, whose trail Major Reno had discovered days earlier. As the specifics of the movement could not be predicted, the department commander placed his full confidence in Custer's zeal, energy, and ability, avoiding any precise orders that might restrict his actions as he neared the enemy. However, the commander did express his views on the strategy Custer should follow, recommending that he continue up the Rosebud until the trail's direction was clear. If it pointed toward the Little Horn, Custer was advised to move southward, possibly to the headwaters of the Tongue, and then veer toward the Little Horn, always guarding against the Indians escaping to the south or southeast. Meanwhile, Colonel Gibbon's column was en route to the mouth of the Big Horn, intending to cross the Yellowstone and advance up to at least the forks of the Big and Little Horns. While future movements would depend on the circumstances, it was hoped that the Indians, if positioned on the Little Horn, would be nearly surrounded by the two columns, making their escape unlikely. The commander also asked that Custer examine the upper part of Tully's Creek on his way up the Rosebud and attempt to send a scout to Colonel Gibbon's column with his findings. A detachment from Colonel Gibbon's command would examine the lower part of the creek, and the supply steamer would navigate the Big Horn as far as possible. The department commander, who would accompany Colonel Gibbon's column, instructed Custer to report to him by the time his troops' rations expired, unless further orders were issued. Respectfully, E.W. Smith, captain of the 18th Infantry and acting assistant adjutant general, signed off on the orders. The instructions were clear and pinpointed the Indians' location accurately. Some writers have speculated that General Terry's command would reach the mouth of the Little Bighorn by June 26, assuming Custer knew of this plan. Additionally, it has been speculated that the two commands were supposed to meet on that date at that location. However, Terry's instructions did not specify when his command would arrive, and it was believed that Custer would not reach the point before July 5th or 6th, given that his troops were rationed for 15 days. At noon on June 22, the regiment set off from camp, marching in columns of fours, each troop followed by its pack mules. Generals Terry, Gibbon, and Custer reviewed the regiment, with General Terry offering a kind word to each officer as they returned his salute. The pack trains struggled at first, with cargoes falling off and mules struggling. However, under Lieutenant Matthews' command, the trains became more efficient, staying well organized after encountering the Indian Trail. The regiment set up camp at 4 p.m. after marching 12 miles at sunset. The officers gathered at General Custer's bivouac, sitting in groups around his bed. The atmosphere was solemn, with little conversation. General Custer addressed the officers, instructing that trumpet calls would only be sounded in emergencies, and marches would begin at 5 a.m. sharp. He trusted that the troop commanders, being experienced officers, could manage their troops, with only the timing of departure and arrival at camp being regulated from his headquarters. He emphasized the need to maintain supporting distance, not outpacing the scouts or lagging behind the column. General Custer expressed confidence in his officers' judgment and loyalty, estimating that they would face at least 1,000 warriors, possibly joined by young men from the agencies, totaling around 15, relying on reports from the Commissioner of Indian Affairs and officials in Washington. General Custer estimated that the opposing force would not exceed 1,500. Although General Terry offered additional troops from the 2nd Cavalry, Custer declined. believing the 7th Cavalry could handle any force against them. He also turned down Gatling guns, fearing they would slow the regiment down due to the rough terrain and poor horse quality. The regiment was to march 25th to 30th miles daily, with officers instructed to conserve rations and the strength of their horses and mules, as they could be out for an extended period. Custer's address to his officers was unusual, as he rarely shared his thoughts so openly. He seemed open to suggestions and relied on his officers, which was out of character. His manner was conciliatory and subdued, with a touch of appeal, leaving a lasting impression on those present. As the officers dispersed, Lieutenants McIntosh, Wallace, and Godfrey walked to their bivouac in silence until Wallace said to Godfrey, "I believe General Custer is going to be killed." When Godfrey asked why, Wallace replied, "Because I have never heard Custer talk in that way before." Godfrey then tended to his troops' preparations, issuing orders for the silent reveille and morning details, and giving instructions in case of a night attack. The stable guard packers and cooks were to calm and guard the horses and mules, while the other men were to gather at a designated spot and await orders. No one was to fire without an officer's command. Godfrey then inspected the herd to ensure the animals' security. While doing so, he came across the Indian scouts' bivouac, where Mitch Beyer, Bloody Knife, Half Yellow Face, and others were talking. Boyer asked if Godfrey had fought the Sioux before, to which Godfrey replied affirmatively. Boyer then inquired about the expected number of Sioux, and Godfrey estimated between 1,000 and 115. Boyer asked if Godfrey thought they could defeat them, and he confidently replied, "Oh yes, I guess so." Boyer, after interpreting their conversation, emphasized, "Well, I can't tell you. We are going to have a damned big fight." At 5 a.m. on June 23rd, General Custer mounted his horse and began the march up the Rosebud, accompanied by 2 sergeants carrying the regimental standard and his personal flag. This signaled the command to mount and follow. 8 miles in, they encountered the first Indian camping site, indicating a large village. They found numerous wickiups, or bush shelters, initially thought to be for dogs, but later realized to be temporary shelters for agency transients. They passed through 3 camping sites, halting at each, with everyone focused on studying the age of droppings, tracks, and lodge trails to estimate the number of lodges. These topics dominated their conversations. They set up camp at 5 p.m., having marched 33 miles on June 24th. They came across numerous camping sites, all appearing to be of similar size. They assumed these were successive camps of the same village, but in reality, they were continuous camps of different bands. The fact that they seemed to be of the same age did not strike them as significant at the time. They passed through a larger camp, where the grass had been grazed by large herds, and found the frame of a Sundance lodge with a white man's scalp inside. This was where Indians from the agencies had joined the hostiles. The command halted and the officers assembled, learning that their Crow scouts had found fresh signs, including pony tracks and an Indian on foot. As they prepared to separate, General Custer's headquarters flag was blown down by a southerly breeze, falling toward the rear. Godfrey picked it up and replanted the staff, but it fell again. He then secured it with a sagebrush. This incident seemed insignificant at the time, but later Lieutenant Wallace mentioned it as a bad omen, foreshadowing their defeat. The day's march was slow, with many long halts to allow the scouts to work ahead. They marched on separate trails to minimize dust clouds, and the valley showed signs of immense pony herds. Signal smokes were reported, but not confirmed. They camped under a bluff at sundown, hiding the command as much as possible. After marching 28 miles, fires were extinguished after supper, and they prepared to march again at 11:30 p.m. Lieutenant Hare and Godfrey retired around 9:30 p.m. for a brief nap. However, their rest was soon interrupted by a voice saying, "He's over there by that tree," which accurately described Godfrey's location. When Godfrey inquired about the purpose of the summons, he was told that General Custer requested the presence of all officers at headquarters. Immediately they abandoned their much-needed rest and navigated through horse herds, sleeping men, and thickets to find headquarters, guided only by a solitary candlelight. Upon arrival, General Custer informed them that the trail led to the Little Bighorn and they would march immediately to conceal themselves near the divide before daylight. This would allow time to study the terrain, locate the village, and plan the attack for the 26th. They returned to their troops, except for Lieutenant Hare, who joined the scouts. The night march was challenging due to dust and noise, making it difficult to see or hear. They relied on following the dust cloud and occasional whistling or hallooing to guide them. Eventually, troopers were sent ahead to listen for sounds from the scouts. Around 2 a.m. on June 25th, our march paused after covering roughly 10 miles, awaiting updates from the scouts. Some troops took this time to unsaddle and let their horses rest, and coffee was brewed, though it was almost undrinkable due to the alkaline water. Before 8 a.m., General Custer, riding bareback, visited each troop, issuing orders to prepare for the march and relaying information from the scouts about the location of the Indian villages. Just before we set off, I saw General Custer deep in conversation with Bloody Knife, the scouts, and an interpreter. The scouts seemed uneasy with Bloody Knife, mentioning that we would encounter enough Sioux to fight for 2 or 3 days. General Custer, with a smile, responded, "I guess we'll be done with them in a single day." We resumed our march at 8:10, pressing on without interruption until about 10:30 when we halted in a ravine. We were ordered to maintain silence, stay hidden, and avoid actions that might reveal our position to the enemy. By this point, we had covered about 10 miles. In battles against the Indians, it is uncommon for a commander to have the luxury of scouting the enemy's position, in daylight especially, if the Indians are aware of the troops' presence nearby. As we trailed the Indians, the signs indicated how long it had been since they had passed. When the signs were fresh, the commander had to judge the distance to the village, often attempting to reach it by nightfall, to plan a surprise attack at dawn. Such attacks had to be swift, with little knowledge of the enemy's numbers beyond what could be